Thank you, friends, for coming on again. I've got Dr. Robinson on as well, and happy that we're here to talk about the Byzantine text. And if you saw a previous interview that we did, we got into a little bit about how modern textual critics are looking at the Byzantine text. And one of the things we want to look at in this video, I wanted to ask him about the evidence from the Apostolic Fathers, from the Patristics, and we're going to get into that. But before I do, I wanted to ask you if he would develop his thoughts a little bit more. I want to say, is there anything that we can say as Byzantine text advocates in response to this process view that the Byzantine text just kind of rose gradually over kind of a process of evolution, if you will? Is there any way that we could respond to this process view that's becoming pretty dominant in academia right now?
This is quoting from my case for Byzantine priority. I cited Zane Hodges, who wrote about this 50 years ago, and maybe the critics today aren't paying that much attention to it, but they ought to. And if you're going to deal with a process model, as what I said in my case for Byzantine priority, the primary problem with the process model is how to account for such a process that is functioning under various locales and the process of transmission itself. And Hodges said this way back in his 1975 paper: no one has yet explained how a long, slow process spread out over many centuries, as well as over a wide geographical area, and involving a multitude of copyists who often knew nothing of the state of the text outside of their own monasteries or scriptoria, could achieve this widespread uniformity out of the diversity presented by the earlier Western and Alexandrian forms of text. An unguided process achieving relative stability and uniformity in the diversified textual, historical, and cultural circumstances in which the New Testament was copied imposes impossible strains on our imagination. And I think that really puts it in perspective that if you don't have the Westcott and Hort formal Byzantine recension in the 4th century, a process view that is going to make all the changes from either a Western original source or an Alexandrian original source in the years from, say, 100 AD until the 4th century to come up with a almost complete Byzantine text by the 4th century. It is, as he says, it imposes impossible strains on our imagination. And of course, the text that you'd find, say, in the Gospels in Codex Alexandrinus is already, as Gordon Fee himself acknowledged, at least 90% Byzantine. And you get about the same percentage just a few years later with Codex Washingtonianus, which, for example, in the Gospel of Matthew is thoroughly Byzantine, and in the Gospel of Luke is half Byzantine. And its text shifts between Byzantine, Western, Caesarean, and that depending on, I guess, what manuscript the scribe may have had at a given point. But you've still got a thoroughly Byzantine Matthew and half of Luke in Washingtonianus. And even though that's going to be somewhere just after 400, you still have a manuscript almost contemporary with Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, text that by all normal transmissional processes could not have just slowly but steadily arisen from either a Western or Alexandrian original.
Yeah.
So that's one of the objections that I think Hodges long ago answered, and I don't try to improve on that statement. That's why I quote it in my case for Byzantine priority as in several other papers that I have written.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So we were addressing in a previous segment some of the objections that Dr. Dirk Youngkind had made, and in his introduction, and he did it in a very charitable manner. We appreciate that. But one of the objections, briefly, that he touched was that you don't find the Byzantine text in the the patristic writings, the apostolic fathers. You don't find those until you get past like the 4th century. How would you respond to that, Dr. Robinson?
There's more than one way to respond to it, but I'm going to go back to John Burgon, which means it's taking things all the way back into the 1880s. And Burgon, of course, had compiled a list of 86,000 patristic quotations, and whether they are all accurate or not is a matter of debate. And the possibility is that he was using what they said were outdated patristic sources. But even so, there are enough quotations among those 86,000 that would still show what the fathers actually were saying, even if some of them today, by using newer critical editions of the fathers, could say that, okay, this reading you can exclude that one, but all these others still have to be included. And what Burgon's conclusion was that even while no father specifically used a 100% Byzantine text before the 4th century, most fathers after the 4th century still were not using a 100% Byzantine text, although they came much more closer to it. But out of those before the 4th century, Burgon said the proportion of patristic quotes supporting the Byzantine text is approximately 3-2, the two being those that support either the Alexandrian or the Western types of text. And if it's 3-2, that means he was saying that for most quotations in the pre-4th century era, 60% of them tend to be Byzantine, even though we don't have any manuscript that is that much Byzantine in its actual text. The early pre-4th century manuscripts are less than the 60%, but the fathers themselves give us 60%. So what happens with that is that after you do get into the legalization of Christianity under Constantine, and you get fathers coming, say, in the 4th or 5th or 6th centuries, they are going to then be using much more of a Byzantine text because there is a greater circulation of manuscripts at that time. They're not going to be localized just to Egypt, and they certainly are not going to be localized just, say, to Constantinople. And the fathers have access to manuscripts that tend to reflect a more Byzantine text, even if they don't go, say, more than 90% Byzantine, they're still going to reflect a text that is Byzantine as opposed to Alexandrian or Western for the most part. So I don't see that much of a problem with it. And I think the legitimization of Christianity under Constantine did a great deal to help improve the circulation of documents and therefore a more standard type text being quoted by patristic writers.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just a little anecdote. I was working with a group of students, taking them through Polycarp's letter to the Philippians. And what was really interesting is that Polycarp, I mean, these scriptures just pour out of him. I mean, almost everything he was saying was just he's drawing from alluding to this verse and alluding to that verse. And then we go back and we compare it to what the Greek New Testament says. And sometimes he would quote these and just make little variations from them. And it was hard to say, is this a direct quote? Is this an allusion? And, sometimes this variation wouldn't correspond to the Byzantine text or the Alexandrian text. He substituted a different word because he's doing it from memory, and so it's very, to me, it's very, and the other thing is when you look at the apparatus in a critical edition of these, like apostolic fathers, you'll find that there is not a whole lot of manuscript evidence for some of these early writers. I mean, sometimes you're dealing with just a handful of manuscripts, and so you've got your own text critical issues that are involved there. And so I think you and I talked about this one time. It's like really our manuscripts, our Greek witnesses themselves really have to be our primary source, if I'm not putting too many words in your mouth there, Dr. Robinson.
Even as Metzger would say, the manuscripts themselves are the primary source for establishing the text of the Greek New Testament. And the fathers and the ancient versions all take a secondary or tertiary role. It's no surprise. The other problem with fathers, which might be even greater, is fathers, like you brought up, sometimes are quoting from memory. Sometimes they are deliberately paraphrasing something. Sometimes they will leave some words out just to make their point. And there's all kind of problems with it. But there is a good Greek series out called the New Testament in the Greek Fathers, which covers several of the fathers and goes through every one of their quotes. And my own major professor, James Brooks, did his on the Greek text of Gregory of Nyssa, who's a 5th century father. And he's he showed basically that Gregory of Nyssa is at least the 90% Byzantine, just as Andrinus, Codex Alexandrinus would be. And if you're looking at Chrysostom, for example, as one of the earliest fathers that quotes a predominantly Byzantine text, even he is up there in the high 80s or in the low 90 percentile of what he's quoting. But again, he could be quoting at times from memory or paraphrasing or adjusting the text as necessary for what might appear in his various sermons or treatises.
Hey, if you've made it this far in the video, we've got a little bit more to go, but if you've made it this far, type in the comments digging deep, and I want to let the members know there is a bonus clip that's available for you in the member section where I asked Dr. Robinson his favorite argument in favor of the Byzantine text. He really surprises me, but let's get into the final segment of the interview now. Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. We'll put a bookmark in it right here, Dr. Robinson. We covered quite a bit of ground, and I think we've answered some of the objections against the Byzantine text. But Dr. Unkind has put forward another objection, and I want to get to that. And so if you're watching this video at a later time, I should put that in the upper right-hand corner so you can watch the video where we address what some might think is a devastating argument against the Byzantine text, but I think there's a good answer for it. So, Dr. Robinson, thank you for being on, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, very good. Thank you.